Hi, for those who are here already.
Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Mark. We'll get started as usual at about 12:35, just giving people time to transition from other meetings and things like that. So, or maybe grab some coffee or whatever. So, hi, Judy.
Hello.
Mhm.
Let's see.
Clicked on. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining us, we'll start in about 4 minutes. Give folks time to transition from other meetings.
I'm taking bets on how many viewers we have in today's meeting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, there's 2 already. Nice. We have to guess which one's the real Norman beer, huh?
Hello.
Hi, Dawn.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Hungry. I'm just getting to breakfast, so I'm not gonna let you watch me eat.
That's fine. We'll
Okay.
get started about 2 more minutes.
Okie dokie. Thank you again, by the way. And I hope everyone's doing well.
Thank you. Welcome to those who are just joining us. We'll get started here in about 1 minute. Okay, well, it's 12:35. I think that we'll get started. We have a lot to cover today. Welcome, everyone. This is the Torus community meeting for March. And I'm Erin Serwinski. I am the manager over learning engineering at the Open Learning Initiative and product manager for the Open Simon Toolkit. I'm joined by many colleagues today, but one in particular who's going to help me is Judy. Judy, you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, everyone. I'm Judy Brooks. I'm the Director of Ed Tech and Design at the Eberly Center here at CMU.
Thanks, Judy. So today, let's see if I have anyone. I don't have anyone taking notes at the moment, so that's okay. These meetings are recorded and we post them. I post them to the Torus community webpage that I'll share with you later on in the presentation. But just know that these are recorded and you can share them with whomever you think would benefit from them. And also to note that this is one of many conversations. We hold these community meetings monthly, but we also intend to and have been holding domain-specific, role-specific, and course-specific meetings, as well as we intend to continue all kinds of ways to collect requirements and ideas. We actually have a web form out on that Torus community webpage as well that I'll point out later. So if you have ideas that you didn't get to articulate in this meeting or that you think of later, please don't hesitate to provide them. We're wanting to hear from as many people as possible about what they think the features and functionality should be of our new next generation OLI system, which we're calling Torus. So moving right along today, well, let me talk about last meeting. Last meeting, we talked about the learning dashboard in particular and discussed ways it was useful and how we might want to make it better. This week, we're extending that conversation to include other dashboard type things that exist now, as well as imagine some things that that would be useful. I expect to tackle each of these in about 20-minute chunks. So I'll go over OLI gradebook, our design audit tool that's in our authoring development system now called Echo, and our learning analytics that are also available in Echo. Some of those things you might not even know exist already, but thinking through what these other dashboardy type things provide, what we'd like to keep, what we'd like to see expanded upon, that sort of thing when we go and build these things in Torus. And some of these things exist already in Torus, and I'll give a little sneak peek of that as well. And then think about other rubrics or audit tools that you use in your everyday life as a teacher or a developer, and maybe think of ways we might be able to incorporate some of those features into Torus as well. So just a quick show of hands. Who is familiar with, we'll say first of all, who's familiar with the gradebook? First of all, the OLI gradebook. Great, I'm seeing a couple folks. For those folks who raised your hand, do any of you want to take a stab at describing the OLI gradebook in one word? You can either put it in the chat or come online. This is really informal meeting, so feel free to just
Annoying.
annoying. Okay. Anyone else? No, don't want to. Does that describe it in a nutshell, essentially?
We have inadequate. I was waiting.
Inadequate. Thanks, Judy. How many of you are familiar with the design audit or learning analytics tools in Echo? Have any of you experienced those or seen those yet? A little bit? Anyone else? Just one. Okay, so you're in for a treat. So let's go into some demos. So give me a moment here to switch up windows. We have a chat I didn't see. Inadequate, yeah. Oh, I don't think I needed to stop my share. What I think I needed was to exit out of. Okay, so what you're seeing right now, I think, is an OLI grade book. This one is in particular for general chemistry, and this is put together as a demo. So these aren't real students, as you can probably tell by some of the names that are there. But at a glance, this is supposed to give you an at a glance vision of participation, really. So these blocks that are all along in the grade book are supposed to give you a quick view of how much participation is going on with any one student. So you can see that Lindsay here, she's done all of the formative assessment in module 1 and module 2, not as much in module 3 and so forth. So you can see some people have done some spotty work here across the whole course. Some other features of this grade book are you can expand these. You can see when you expand any given module, you'll see these are two high stakes or bookend, I would say, quizzes. Sometimes we have labs that are that we have wired up to report to the grade book. And then you can see scores here for folks. And if you expand on any of these folks, I had this open way before the presentation, so it's giving me errors, probably kicked me out. Give me a second here to get this back. Of course, when you want to give a demo, it's better if I just log out. Apologize. Get back to my setup here. Okay, we're back. Now I should be able to expand these. So I have just expanded module 2, 3, and 4. You can see the scores that have been given for folks who have completed the high stakes assessments. You can drill into these to see multiple attempts. So this is a way to see different attempts by the same student and which one was actually logged as the grade. You can expand on those as well to see different timestamps. Let me see, what else do I want to show? If you expand some of these, there are places where there's a lab, and where, here we go. Like, so these labs aren't necessarily graded, but we added them to the grade book to show that they've been completed in an easy way. And you can get to the dashboard for any of these modules just by clicking the dashboard button. I'm not going to go clicking around because I just want to show the grade book and its capabilities. So this is our grade book. As folks have described it, inadequate, disappointing, maybe I would call it, annoying. So one of the things that we're doing with the Torus effort is we are essentially deferring capabilities of known, well-developed things, functionality that the LMS does. And so we're using LTI linkages to be able to make better use of the gradebook functionality of the LMS from which students will access their OLI course. So I just wanted to take a moment, not too much time on the gradebook because of that deferment. But are there things about the gradebook that, and thinking about also the use of your LMS gradebook, if you have one and use one, what does that gradebook maybe not provide that we should maybe consider building within OLI, new OLI, or just general discussion about OLI gradebook, LMS gradebooks, gradebooks in general. I just want to kind of, looks like some people are really ready for this. So, okay, let's go ahead, and with one person's hand up. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble expanding. Christina, thanks.
Hi, thanks. Because unfortunately I can't stay for the entire meeting. I have overlapping Zoom meetings, so I'm glad we're dealing with the gradebook first. So I think my, and I also wasn't on the email list, so I only found out about these meetings recently.
I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did.
And I have lots to say, as Judy knows.
Okay.
So I think the main problem is that the way that I'm using OLI is not entirely to flip the classroom, but to assign activities that I want done before the student, we do something in class, right? So sometimes these are discovery activities, you know, get them doing an activity, you know, making some observations, so then in class we can discuss them. Sometimes the activities are something that I want them to do after class, but before section, get a bit of practice in before they work on something in section. And I would, and I think part of the advantage with OLI is not just that, you know, we can do these formative assessments, but also that in some sense I can force the students to do them by having some kind of assessment, you know, even if it's a question or two, some kind of question to ensure that they do them. And that aspect of OLI has significantly improved what, you know, a few years back I would have tried to do with do this reading and these recommended questions, which of course nobody does on the schedule that I think is important to maintain pace with the material. The problem, however, is that in a class of over 100, there is no easy exporting function and no easy integration with the Canvas LMS for me to actually check that. So last semester, I was in the embarrassing situation of, I wasn't aware of this limitation. And so I basically deferred, I essentially, you know, lied by omission so that my students wouldn't catch on that I couldn't actually check anything. And then, you know, sort of did a hack at the end that would certainly be in their favor. I didn't want to be in that same situation this semester. So I've added summative assessments, and I can request a report from OLI, you know, and so that's what we're doing. And that's working reasonably well-ish. But for example, but you know, I get this spreadsheet from Excel, and then of course I have to then use Excel functions to get some kind of summary so that then I can import it as a grade into Canvas and so on and so forth. That's a very clunky system. And I know, for example, that if I try to pass this off to somebody else in the teaching team, maybe who doesn't have that kind of facility with manipulating, you know, Excel data and so on and so forth, they're just not going to do it. So what I really need from OLI is a way to manage and check the data sort of wholesale. I need to have access to when students are doing things and that they are doing them. And it can't be something where I have to click 15 times for each student to check it and do it manually. And in a really ideal world, it could even be integrated in Canvas so that if I create a Canvas assignment that's linked to an OLI module, then when they do that, it automatically updates into Canvas. Now, maybe that's wishful thinking, but
you're in luck. I mean, that's what that's what I was kind of referring to at the beginning of this. Our new system already links to, uses LTI integration to link to the gradebook, and you'll do exactly what you described. You'll be able to put the grades right into your LMS gradebook. And probably even, I'm not familiar with LMS gradebooks, so I haven't used them a lot. But you know, be able, whatever the last thing is you said, be able to create a grade in the LMS gradebook that links to something in OLI. That's exactly how it will be.
Right, and then if just in terms of the interface, there is an easier way to view without the 15 different clicks.
Yes,
you know, that would really also be helpful. Okay, I'm done. I said my thing.
Yeah, Christina, I don't want it to be overlooked that you said also when they are doing things, not just that
Yeah.
they are doing them. So you need some sort of, I know that that was kind of critical for you because you wanted to make sure they were doing them before class, not just any time.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
The timestamp is really important. You know, so, and I mean, that has made a huge difference, you know, for the students to be ready, you know, that has been an incredible difference in terms of the quality of questions I'm getting, and you know, so that is a good thing. It's just that I don't, if the students know that I can't check it, you know, they're going to find other priorities will take over. I don't blame them for that. I mean, that's what I would do. So I don't blame them for that, but we need to have the idea of a deadline has to be in there without, and ideally the idea of that deadline would not only be linked to summative assessments, because sometimes the summative assessments are really not appropriate for the kind of activity that I have. And so I ended up creating summative assessments for all of my OLI modules just to have that timestamp. But some of them are really kind of hacky and they don't.
Yeah, so with an LMS integration, you could actually have the LMS do the work of the date when it's due, right? You wouldn't actually need OLI to report out a timestamp at that point. Okay.
No, I don't need that. Like I need that to be, and ideally something that's automated and through the LMS. And
Perfect. Norman.
Christina,
Yeah,
hey, sorry, I'm jumping in here from another webinar. I think just to reaffirm what both Aaron and Judy have said, that we hear you, and that what you're putting your finger on has been a long-standing point of friction in the OLI interface that is currently designed. There was a philosophy for the formative assessments that said, hey, we want this to be a safe place for students to work. We don't want to reveal too much information because then students won't engage authentically. They're going to look up answers. And so that really got hard-coded into the platform in a way that's been unfortunate, because as we've grown and learned, you know, that approach completely ignores the other role that we play as educators in terms of encouraging, sometimes forcing student engagement and ongoing participation, and that the ways that we've chosen to present these data have limited educators' ability to do that. And so we really need to be much more thoughtful and intentional on this piece of the interface, both in terms of what we're presenting in the OLI interface and in what we are able to push back to the LMS. And so I hope that he will be available as we continue to do our design investigations and research, because this isn't one that we're going to get right on our first try, right? This is something we're going to need to iterate on and keep getting some information from the community.
I am more than happy to share my opinions, as Judy and Harley know. So
awesome. Thank you.
So how about some others? Anybody else have something to say about gradebook functionality, whether it be OLI, something you make sure you want to keep versus deferring to LMS?
Yeah, so Bonnie had put in the chat low stakes items, but I think Christina's comments there cover that, but Bonnie, feel free to elaborate if need be.
No, I think that's exactly it. And as Norman explained, it allows us to do many things, not only in terms of teaching, but also in terms of identifying bad items and getting to them sooner rather than later when it comes to revamping our courses. I would say, in addition to that hopefully the look will change. It gets a little messy, I think, on top, where you have the Module 1 course introduction, the Module 2, and then you have the little things under there, and then the make it go, you know, the arrows on either side, make it get bigger. It just looks clunky, I guess, and it's not completely intuitive, at least during the years that I've been using it. But it could be, it could just be that I'm not intuitive enough. So.
And Norman mentions you're kind to say a little messy. Yeah.
And if I understand it correctly, the new LTI would actually eliminate, correct me if I'm wrong, the grade book from OLI, because you'd be leveraging the grade books from any LMS that you're using. Therefore, Bonnie, the look and feel would be that of the LMS.
Correct.
As just a follow-up, one of the limitations of some of the LMSs is, and I don't know if this is something that even can be addressed in OLI, but suppose you do want to have some summative assessments that actually matter. You know, a common practice for instructors is to drop the lowest, or, you know, lowest quiz or 2 lowest quizzes or something like that. I'm wondering if this is going to be possible, or another aspect of the OLI, which is currently frustrating, is the fact that I have to manually open and manually close the summative assessments. First of all, it takes like 15 clicks, feels like, per opening and closing. But what it also means is that, so I'm doing it, you know, for each class per module, just because that makes it easier. I can just sit down, do it, and then be done. But for example, you know, I have students who I know right now, you know, I've got students with COVID, and, you know, they're not going to be able to keep up with the class. But once I close the assessment, I can't open it up again. I can't make student specific changes. Is that all going to be addressed by this integration with the LMS? Or will we be able to open up a particular, you know, assessment or whatever for a particular student on a different time scale? Or these are, I think, very practical questions that need to be dealt with.
Yeah, agreed. I think some of the LMS can handle some of that, but there may be some things that OLI will need to attend to in order to connect to that functionality. For example, creating an assignment on different time scales. You can do that in Canvas. And so I'm assuming that Canvas would take that role and trigger the OLI opening and closing for that group of students. But OLI will need to connect to that, so.
Right. We might not have answers to these questions at the moment, but just you asking the questions is really important part of what we need to incorporate when we're you know, working on this functionality. So thank you for those great questions. Anyone else have anything else to say about grade books before I move on? Okay, so I'm going to move on. I talked about design audit tools, and we have this in our Echo authoring environment now. And for those of you who might not be familiar with our Echo authoring environment, this is a first view of it. This is a view of our computing at Carnegie Mellon course in Echo. So I'm not going to go over a whole overview of Echo. If you are interested in using Echo or seeing what it's like now, please look on our website. We have regular webinars that talk through and give orientation to Echo and how to use it. So please, if you haven't been in there already, please attend one of those and get to know it. But essentially what you're seeing right here is one view. I'm going to go to the objectives because we're looking at design audit. So what I mean by design audit is really tools or a dashboard to help you know if you're providing enough practice or assessment toward each skill of a learning objective as your course is designed. So the course, this design audit tool shows all of the learning objectives in your course, and you can expand on each one of those. It gives you a summary of how many pages this learning objective is addressed on, and how many skills that learning objective has, and then the number of formative and summative questions against each skill and therefore learning objective. So if you expand on these, you'll see that this learning objective is handled on 2 pages, and I can go right to those pages now and see them. This learning objective has been broken down into 3 skills, and each of those skills, well, has a number of formative and summative questions. Then we have this little exclamation point to tell you, here's a place where you might want to address coverage of these skills, either in practice or in summative assessment. So for example, this one, because ideally we'd like to have at least we'd like to have a number of both, and we're trying to make sure that you attend to those things that maybe don't have high numbers of practice. So, so it's saying skills should have at least 3 summative questions, and I believe we do 3 formative as well. So this one has good formative coverage, you can see, but maybe not enough coverage on the high stakes assessments. And let me see, I gotta move my windows around here to see their whole rest. Each of these, excuse me, listings is the actual question where these skills are practiced or measured. And so the little beaker showing that this question is a formative assessment question, this is practice, and then the little baskets are actually telling us that these questions are in larger pools. So if you don't know that OLI has the ability to develop question pools and deliver so many questions from a larger bank, and that's what that's showing. So this gives you a good sense of, am I providing enough practice as you're designing the course, or even to look at a course that you're teaching and say, you know, where are places I might want to customize. And so I wanted to take some time to show you all this if you haven't, or to talk to those who are familiar with it, who have used it, and just tell me what you think. What do you think of knowing this, having access to this kind of information? Is it helpful? In what ways is it helpful? Anybody have anything to start off with in terms of reactions?
Aaron, I do this, Michael Bet. So I'm using it and it's very good. I would like to have a lot more flexibility from moving from skill to learning objective, and because that's actually something I'm doing right now with the course I'm working on. I'm deciding, okay, I listed these things as learning objectives, but they're really skills. It'd be great if I could just slide them down and build a list, and it maybe just mark it as a skill or learning objective, and have a little more flexibility that way. And then, yeah.
So let me dig in a little more about what you said. So are you looking for ways to manipulate the learning objectives and skills a little bit better? So I think what I heard you say is, if you see this learning objective and you're trying to modify your model, essentially,
yes,
you want to be able to use some functionality here to be able to do those manipulations. So say I decide that this learning objective is actually a skill, be able to actually move it down very easily and create a new learning objective over those skills. Is that
or nest it and under another learning objective?
Oh, okay.
You know, because that's really what I'm creating something. I just decided, okay, this is just too specific to be a learning objective, and so I want to, without having to redo this work. You know, it's not hard to do this, but it's very kind of it's tedious and getting it right. So it'd be nice to be able to promote or demote a skill or objective.
Right. So you want to be able to say, maybe this one should be a new learning objective instead of a skill, or this one should actually be a skill of this one, and be able to move between those more fluidly.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Michael.
And then maybe, I don't know if it's like, you know, when you're adding existing skills, it'd be nice if that appeared next to it, so I can do like a drag and drop in this sort of just another, same thing with learning objectives.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good sense too. I was just doing that. I don't know if you guys can see. I think I have my whole screen shared. So if I select one of this add existing skill, are you seeing the pop up?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, you are. Okay. So to your point, Michael, you're saying it's not as helpful to have this pop up, and then you kind of lose focus of what's behind it, and you'd rather be able to do some drag and dropping. Okay.
Yeah, and maybe, you know, since we end up with a lot of skills, I don't know if we have to have a skill hierarchy. Well, I don't know, but that's probably version 3.0.
Well, it's a good point though, that when you have, you need a space to be able to evaluate and analyze and then act on those.
Yeah, like are these skills related to safe computing, or are they related to whatever the unit is before Unit 3, that you have there? So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
so maybe I only see those skills when or I can have an accordion like we do on the left-hand side.
Nice, nice.
So Aaron, sorry.
No, please. I was just going to address the chat.
Yeah, I was going to maybe do 1 and then 2, even though they came in a different order. Bonnie is asking, could you talk a little bit through the interface? Bonnie is asking what the little bottles mean, or the symbols under the skills. So if you could explain that, and then we can address that other question around what are skills with respect to outcomes.
Yeah, I said that the bottles are referring to formative questions, whereas the baskets are summative questions in pools. So that's what those little symbols mean at the moment. Great. They don't fill. It's just a static symbol. It's just one, like an icon. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then what else? I'm sorry.
The skills is how do they relate to the outcomes?
So the skills, what we tend to do when we're building and designing courses in OLI is we break down learning objectives into their component skills. So ideally, these skills are the component parts of a learning objective that students have to master in order to build up and master the entire learning objective. So, it's a science and an art. We try to break things down to make sure that students are getting practice and getting mastery of the learning objective through each part of that learning objective.
So we actually had a problem, Judy, you'll remember in French, where we had so many skills broken down under each objective or outcome that they were completely impossible to keep track of. Does this have a risk? And maybe Michael can answer hi Michael, because he seems to be using this particular course.
Well, it's more of a result of your design than the interface, So if you have, I tend to, when I'm building a course, have some rules of thumb in my mind. If you're having a lot of skills, in fact, more than this is the advice I give. Other designers might say something different, but in my experience, I've found that if any given learning objective has more than 6 skills, then you need to think about, is there really more than one learning objective going on there that maybe you need to break it up a little bit more. If I use the same kind of rules in my head, if there's less than one, if you don't have at least 2 skills, then is it really a learning objective, or is it a skill of another learning objective? Those are my kind of guidelines, but nothing's
okay.
And actually doing this and using this data as well as the analytics data that I'll show in a little bit, taking those things together after you have some students run through the course is where you start to dig in and say, okay, are these making sense? You can start to, and we can help with that as well, as that really helps with that kind of analysis.
Okay, thanks.
And I think just to piggyback on that, Aaron,
sure.
One of the things that we aspire to better support in Torus is new experiments and new approaches to skills and knowledge modeling and instruction. And so the current auditing tools and dashboard were designed with one model for skills modeling. And we think pretty quickly we found that the modern language courses envision that process a little bit differently. I've usually describe it as a spiral rather than as a linear approach. And so one of the other things that we want to think about is that if the interface it's not just a question of does the interface need to change, but rather on the back end, how does Torus provide robust support for different approaches to modeling knowledge? And if it turns out that yes, different domains have different approaches for building a knowledge model, it's a thing that we want to think about. And so that's also the kind of feedback that we're going to need. And it's funny because I call it feedback, but it's almost pre-feedback, right? These are the kinds of considerations that need to inform the architecture of the platform, even before we start thinking about the design and the interfaces and the visualization. So keep beating that drum, because I think it's important.
Absolutely. I like how Bonnie called it a slinky. Slinky vision.
How many of us can sing the song?
Oh,
can.
I can. Anyone else? Thank you guys. This is fantastic feedback. It's really nice to talk to folks who are using these tools in a way that and that they can provide such good, rich feedback. Dave, is that you? Did you just join us?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the right point to say. So scaffolding, we're having this issue or potential issue that a web page that's really kind of going after the exact same task, but it starts off with incredibly high scaffolding, and like every little step is broken out, and then at the end, it does it no more. Now see if you can do it all at once, and they're getting equal weights. Every little step in the highly scaffolded thing is getting the same weight in the analysis as that one thing at the end that's like do it all. And talking with Naboru about it, and he's like, well, then they're different skills, but I don't think they're different skills. Or if you go that way, I don't think it's gonna, I don't know what that'll lead to. What would the skill be? You can do this with a lot of hand holding, and then that's skill 1, and skill 2 is you can do it with less hand holding. That seems to lose something. So I don't know if other people are having this, running into that issue.
Oh, I'm sure you're not the only one. Maybe not here on this call. Anyone have any further discussion about that idea and how you think about that? Because even having a discussion like that might help us think of ways and functionality we might need to support to think that through.
I'd love to hear about that one from Naburu's perspective, since it looks like he's on the call.
Yeah.
Because this also gets at this place of not just what's supported in the OLI system, but how do we thoughtfully integrate with the broader Simon ecosystem, the other tools that are out there, particularly our educational data mining ecosystem. So Naburu, what's on your wish list for how we support different approaches? In the end, this is different approaches to skill modeling, and how does this play within DataShop and LearnSphere?
True. I and Dave have been long conversation about how to scaffold. Let's see. To my view, I wonder if I understand actually correctly what the Dave is after. But here is my understanding. The students can solve a problem if they are provided kind of high scaffolding, like do this first. What about this next? And then do this next. What is this, right? And then the answer here. And then they have trouble solving the same problem without scaffolding. And then this is more like a Pittsburgh, right? The cognitive, tutor, the theory, right? The theory says we can break down the skill into sub-steps. And then we can target each of these sub-steps, right? As a production to develop. If that theory holds, then I think the scaffolded version of the problem has a different skill set than non-scaffolding version of problem. That was my take. But I have a little funny feeling to take that route actually. The knowledge, more like knowledge forms complicated web of skills, right? The concepts. It's not like you can target a particular specific skill here, skill there, right? If you can apply this. I have no clear answer for this question. It's a really complicated question. I was wondering if we can tag the assessment with kind of hierarchical skill model. Right, so you may tag an assessment as a single skill, like solve, like the unit conversion. This assessment may have broken down steps, and then the system may provide some scaffolding, right? Do this first. What about this? And then each of these the sub steps may have its own skill. Then if you plot the learning curve, you may plot the learning curve at the higher level, like the unit conversion skill versus intermediate skills. I'm pretty sure Ken has a different opinion here because he is, I guess he's leaning toward more like a breaking down skills.
Yeah, it's an interesting. One other somewhat related thing is a same measure, like if you were measuring the student every time they interact with one of these things. Regular psychometrics has a sort of difficulty level. They would do some sort of psychometric thing that says this question has this level of difficulty. And that, in some sense, might be part of, like the ones where the scaffolding is here's every step-by-step help, but there's also the sort of scaffolding of here a multiple choice, like for numerical calculation especially, that here's 4 possible answers. Sometimes you can get the answer just by knowing. If you get some result that's not one of those 4, you keep going. There's all sorts of things that make that easier than fill in the number in this text box. There, it's hard to say that those are different skills. I guess you could say one is generating and one is recognizing or something, but I suspect another way to look at it is a way you would just say, what does Roche analysis say for the difficulty of this item? And to factor into the analysis that difficulty factor might be another way to think about it.
Yeah, it's interesting. If 2 assessments have different difficulties, then I think the theory of the knowledge components says they involve different knowledge components. But then I see that Dave wants to.
Yeah, I don't know. That seems the depth of knowledge of. I guess maybe this is related to the learning object versus skill thing. That the learning objective.
Well, but your argument earlier, or your suggestion, not argument, Dave, that involves. I mean, the suggestion that scaffolding was what was contributing to difficulty level rather than something inherent in the question itself feels like a place to bridge this challenge of are there different skills here, or is there no such thing as difficulty? It's simply different KCs, or is there some place where we consider a unity of KC and difficulty? Is there, and this isn't something we're going to solve today, but I mean, is there a need for capturing difficulty as something that is assigned, right? Do you determine do you need to capture what you think the difficulty of an item is, or is this always empirical, right? Can we always just, run once we have some data, let's student use, let's run Grumbiles or something on it to get a difficulty measure?
My experience in standard setting for the advanced placement program, they bring in like 20 experts from various reasons why they would be experts, and say, tell me what you think these questions are on the scale of 1 to 5 from easy to hard. And then you compare that to the empirical data, from 100 or 150,000 students, and it's almost random. It's amazing how hard it is. It shocks me a little bit. Whereas I do think people around the question development committee, they have a little bit better, but it does seem hard to predict these things. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. So a little bit of opinion here and a little bit of a question. Little bit of opinion, I think, is that you could see those things, those different scaffolding levels as different skills. And I think you noted that when you said, Dave, like, well, you know, the verb would be different essentially at the beginning of each of the skills. However, there are some skills you just don't need to measure at that fine grain of level, right? So they might, I think there's still some playing around and manipulating to do to be able to get the right model in place that gives you the information to really diagnose students. But aside from that, it sounds like what you guys are asking for is a little bit of item analysis built into these analytics as well, which is something we don't go very far into, and that gets into more of the psychometrics. But so we'd have to find a balance.
Yeah.
How much of that is really needed versus helpful, right? And helpful versus just extra stuff. So yeah, I would love to dig in with you more on all of that.
Yeah. A basic Rosh analysis wouldn't be hard to build in, I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But you know, we could take it too far too, right? We want to make it also helpful and help people who maybe don't understand it a way to learn more about it too.
If I can say something, it feels to me like there's actually kind of a distinction here because people brought up several things. And so scaffolding, I think, often does represent additional skills, right? As you can see in things, right, like Ken's geometry example, where in fact, like they kind of discovered a skill that way, right? So there's this kind of planning and putting things together skill that scaffolding is kind of taking over for students. But somebody also mentioned something like a multiple choice question where you can see some of the answers, and that could like, you know, maybe students are like guessing and checking instead of doing the thing that's desired. But theoretically, a student could totally do exactly the same thing, and the difference is that they can see if they got it wrong and redo it before they pick the answer, right? And that's not really a different skill because they're still doing the same thing, right? In terms of what you actually want them to learn, right? Since there's not like the skill you're trying to learn isn't like, you know, how to do multiple choice questions or whatever, right? So that does seem actually like a difficulty level, but it's less a difficulty level of the skill and more difficulty level of getting the question right.
Interesting.
I think it's interesting to compare the learning curve analysis and then item level item analysis.
Mm-hmm.
If we see disagreement, that may flag something.
Yeah, that's a good approach too.
The other thing this makes me wonder is if it would be ever useful to kind of be able to like auto generate sub skills if like multiple learning objectives are going to have sub skills in the same pattern, right? Like for instance, for vocabulary words, or like recognition versus recall of a word are different. And those are often considered of different difficulty levels. But like every word has that, and you wouldn't want to like have to click twice for every word, right? Or similarly for like, you know, if there are a bunch of problem types and you want the scaffolding to be a different skill for every problem type, like, would it be helpful to say all of these learning objectives should have a planning skill? Because it's not the same planning skill, right? But they all have it.
I mean, I want a top level comment of like we were looking at learning curves and we were seeing flat ones. That's where this sort of came from. And then looked and thought about it and said, well, these pages, they're well designed to fade scaffolding. And so in a certain sense, if learning curve is measuring performance versus opportunity, then would the goal of a well scaffolded, a well faded page be to have a flat learning curve? And then that was like, that's where that was the first thing that came, like, how would you do that? And what would it mean to...
That's super interesting. I should hold some meetings just discussing that alone, because we could really get into the different ways people use this analysis. You know, earlier Michael was talking about how he'd like to have some manipulation tools, and that kind of feeds into that. So I definitely will be reaching back out to you guys as we dig into that feature and functionality more. Great discussion. Thank you. But in the essence of time, or for timing purposes, we're going to move on to a little bit similar thing. Actually, this probably gets at more of what you guys were talking about than the audit tool, which is our analysis tools. We do have some analysis tools at the moment built into Echo as well. So after you've built a course and you've run it out in the wild for a while, we have the ability to pull that data back in the aggregate to show some insights. And so, oops, that's not what I wanted to show. Let me go back to, let me see. Oh, same course. I want to just go to another place. So to show some analytics here that we already have. So right now I'm in this unit. I'm clicked into this unit called Safe Computing. And and by the way, you can see these analytics at a variety of levels throughout the course. So usually if you're in the unit, you'll see the list of unit objectives, or you'll see module objectives too. But right now I'm going to go through unit. And as you open these up, what you're seeing is the analytics we've pulled in from student use. This is the learning objective. These are the questions, or here's the skill. I'm sorry, I'm having to move my window around, it's too big. Here is this one of the skills associated with this learning objective, and then here are all the questions listed that get at that skill, that give practice or assess that skill, and some analytics pulled in to show you at a glance how each of these questions are performing, essentially. So this is telling you first how many students, how much data have we collected, how many students have attempted this question. This green bar shows how many, percentage of students that get it right on the first time. This number here next to it is the number of the percentage of students that get it right eventually. And then this is calculation of difficulty in terms of, I don't know if you can see this pop up, so I'll read it. The ratio of times a student either requested a hint or gave an incorrect answer to the total number of interactions. A higher ratio indicates greater difficulty. So we're making an attempt at showing a difficulty rate for each question. And as you can see here, it doesn't give you any information about what you should do. It gives you places to look, right? Places that can flag, like here, down here, where insecure passwords that can be easily guessed is the question. And you can see that 6% of students submitted a correct response the first attempt, but 96 eventually get it correct. It might be, that might give you some insights into what might be going on. If you look at this and say, oh, it's a hard question, and we kind of expect students to get it wrong the first time. It's a learn by doing. It's something, it's exploratory. They haven't been given the answer yet in the text. Then that might be okay, as long as they're eventually getting it correct. However, there's times where you might want to look into that. If they're never getting it correct, that might tell you something about a miscoding, or even that there's not enough instruction or scaffolding on the page. There's many ways you can dig into this, but I believe this gives you a really first look and an immediate way of seeing at a glance where there might be issues with your course materials.
Erin?
Yes?
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So it looks like the second column is redundant with the rightmost column, because it's just basically 1 minus whatever's in the last column. I don't see real information in the second column.
This second column here, the difficulty, is that what you're?
Yeah, because if you add it to the right column, like I don't know, the line you're on, 0.06 and 0.94 is 1. If you can go down, it's basically, there are a few.
So
yeah,
Michael,
so
part of what this is reflecting is the questions that we're looking at tend to be, students aren't asking for hints. And so you're not seeing hints reflected in that difficulty. But if students are asking for a lot of hints, that also rolls into this number, such that you can get numbers, at 1 and above for things where students are asking for a lot of help.
So maybe if you want to do that, maybe it's like % of students that ask for help or some other metric, you know, because having the % correct rolling in there is just kind of not helpful because it's already reflected in the last column.
Well, and I think it's important to acknowledge where this display came from. That once upon a time, a young course developer joined OLI and was very excited about doing data-driven iterative improvement, and had a giant pile of data thrown at him by one John Rinderley. And so the young course developer did his best to build with the tools he had, which is a spreadsheet, honestly trying to build out some things that would be meaningful to our subject matter experts. And the first time around, they looked at it and said, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? So we tried again, and we tried again, and we tried again. And so this thing has sort of been refined over the years, but it's been refined mostly with input from the folks who have been trying to use it. I think that one of the spots where we would love to do more work, but haven't, has been in re-emphasizing, are there ways to show what's most important here, right? That in the end, this is a tool that tries to guide people's eyes to maybe there's something here you should take a look at. And, sometimes we do that okay. Sometimes we do it poorly. And so that's, so there is plenty of room for improvement here. And if you're thinking more about what you want to see, this is exactly what we need to hear from you, right? You're saying, hey, I either a new column or replace this column with something that just shows me hints asked for.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this is actually really, really good because I mean, I'm kind of curious about, okay, so if what I have can see the % of people who solved it on the first try, what % solved it on, especially for the red question, the one that's red, how many people solved it on the second or third tries, and what's the hint history on those people. So like that kind of stuff would be really cool to see because that really is a good, I mean, obviously the 6% is an indicator there's something really wrong, but being able to dig down into that would tell me, is it the problem with the hints or is it a fundamental problem with the way it's worded or something like that. So I mean, it'd be nice actually if, here's my wish list. I know it's not going to happen. If I could select from a list of columns and display the ones that I wanted, that would be great. If I could, almost like a pivot table where the data is there, can I decide what data to show? Because you can't show everything probably.
I guess along those lines, is there like a filtering column where you can just have all of the reds be at the top?
Not at the moment, so that's great. That's a great.
Yeah, that might be something useful as well. It's kind of going off from what Michael said.
Yeah.
Quick question just about what the information means. The got it correct eventually, would that for a multiple choice question count if they just clicked every single choice until they saw which one was right?
Yep, that's exactly what that would mean.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, but this is good stuff. There's a lot of good information here. It'd be great to be able to dig into this.
Yeah, I mean, it's available now in Echo if you have any courses in Echo. And if you don't, then tell us and we can pull them into Echo. Anyone else have any reactions to this? How many are seeing this for the first time?
So the quick question. Sure. So for the question that has a very, very low correct, right? Like a red on the right column. Mm-hmm. I would wonder what's going on here, right? So like, can I see what's the common error the students made? Can I see what kind of instruction was available for this particular problem, can I edit the instruction right away?
So we don't have those clicks at the moment, like that take you to those different places. Right now, I can go right to the question and start to edit the question. And by the way, even in the question, these analytics exist too. But those are great suggestions, Gordon.
Cool.
I guess in terms of our general goal of interoperability, it would be great if that click could go to the error report in DataShop, which does provide the information Deborah is asking for.
That's cool. That's a great suggestion. And I know we plan to have tighter integration with DataShop and Torus if we don't already.
And part of what we're incrementally doing in our long-term goals with DataShop is to factor routines like they are in LearnSphere into components. So an error report component could be built. And that we have web services, so it's not like you have to necessarily use all of DataShop, but I guess the error report requires the transaction table as input and does some processing on it. But I think, I think it'd be, there's always debate about, build or buy, where buy here is free, but there's a cost to the interoperability work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think the interoperability work sometimes just seems as hard as the cost of rebuilding. But I think we should resist that evaluation because, I think we want to kind of grease the real wheels isn't the right metaphor. We need to chop through the forest that prevents interoperability and, suffering maybe a little bit extra work in a few cases to start getting those pathways through the forest. Mm-hmm. I think it's worth it in the long term. And I think it's often the case that the positive side effects that come from that are underestimated in the initial analysis that says, let's just build it ourselves.
I think that's right, Ken. And I think that shows up pretty, I'm happy with the way that that's happening in Torus. I think that we've, prioritized that integration with DataShop from the first demo, and that some of the work that we're looking to do with Mike and Cindy is going to accelerate that. I think we need to get a better sense of, if we start streaming all OLI data into DataShop, how do we start to think about, what is a data set? How do we start to put some constraints around it? But, that top level of making sure that everything that's represented in Torus is also represented in DataShop is the harder lift of this. I think that then, from there, getting some of the integration into the existing reports is easier if we can get the hard lift done. So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, let me just highlight that. I think what we want is not necessarily to go in DataShop as this monolith, but to take this factoring approach that if you want error reporting, there's a component or a workflow, a series of components to produce error reports, right? And then however the web access calls are made to produce those reports, right? It doesn't have to be a full database to do that. A table can be translated, for example, or it can come from the database. But in either, you see, the distinction I was making is instead of saying replicate everything in DataShop, think about the factored components more that can be plugged and played in multiple different applications.
Right. Yeah. Particularly on the reporting and analysis pieces. Yeah.
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 Yeah. Sometimes there's ambiguity, like, in CTAT, we have this behavior graph, which was initially more of a display, but then it became an authoring tool. but it can also be used to display, like if you want to see how branchy our responses in a multi-step activity, the behavior graph could be used as an output visualization with some tweaking. I think at one point Bruce did something like that, but I mean, I think that's part of the extra leverage we could get by reusing components.
Great.
So this red program here is kind of interesting example. This could be a confusing program that unnecessarily increase the difficulty of the factor if you run the IRT model, right? And then this may be one of the KC that has a beautiful decline in the learning curve. And this problem is troublesome problem.
Right, right.
Right. So then, if we see a jump in the learning curve, so this may be the culprit problem for the spike.
Right.
So we really want to know what's going on.
Yeah, I was saying you might look at something like that and determine that that's the way it should be, right? That you see actual learning occurring as part of this question, and that it could be, like I had said before, maybe a learn by doing, where all of the instruction is even built into the question. So you do expect, if they're exploring and they're doing, you know, this in a formative and not a high stakes way, you would see that learning was taking place just from their various interaction with that question.
So Ken is asking, what are these 4 columns? The leftmost is the number of students answered. Rightmost is the first attempt correct. The second from right is eventually correct. And then what was the second from left?
Second from left is a difficulty ratio that takes in
needed.
It takes into account hints as well. Oops.
Ken, this is a boiled down version of the old magic spreadsheets that we used to build offline. This just automates it.
So I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I guess if 6% is an average over all opportunities of a knowledge component, it's very unlikely that that's going to be good. Like you could imagine something at 50%, you know, the first 5 opportunities, let's just for simplicity say it started at 80% error, right? And it's gone down to 20% error, you know, so half of them are above 50 and half of them are below. That probably we might be fine with, or, you know, definitely if went from 100 to 0 and averaged 50, then we'd be fine with that. But it seems like 6% is the question, not the skill.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, for this particular question.
So
yeah, so if that question's always the first question, then there may not be anything wrong at all. Yeah.
Right.
6 does seem surprisingly low, but
it does.
But actually it might be like, if it is another possibility is it's meant to be like a predict, observe, explain, or a preparation for future learning, or a pre-assessment. And then, you know, then 6%, yeah, we caught something that people really don't know.
Right.
Or, and I don't know, when it's that low, it's often there's another option if it's a multiple choice that represents a strong misconception. Could be that it's a mislabeled item, of course. That's what, I guess that's part of the magic of the magic spreadsheet, is you go look and make sure, first of all, that the right answer isn't labeled as wrong.
Exactly.
That's right. So
that kind of goes to Navarro's point, right? A clickable error report would be really useful. Yeah, actually, one thing that's, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm going to switch subjects. So if you still have more to say.
Well, I don't want to hold back your agenda because you only have 15 minutes left.
I do. And so and what I really wanted to get to is I was going to say, sorry, Ken, that you came late. And we really do want your input on this. So we'll be following up for sure. But what I wanted to do is to give a sneak peek to how some of these things look in Torus now. And so let me go over to that. And first, well, I'll start with this one since this is where we are. So this is the same information, but the way it displays in Torus right now. And so you have more of the ability to slice and dice this data too. So you can view it by page or by objective. And this is by activity. And so it's giving the same analytics. I just wanted to show how that's done. And then to talk a little bit about some additional audit tools, I mean, for lack of a better word, or review tools or rubrics that you might want to see incorporated into Torus. And so an example of that is what we have, something we have right now, which is these review audits. So right now we have built into Torus the ability to check for accessibility items or issues, as well as some pedagogical issues. So for example, an image that's missing alt text, or in terms of pedagogy, you have activities that aren't attached to a learning objective or skill. So this is the type of audit that we're trying to provide, and we're imagining some additional ones. There's a quality rubric called Oscar that SUNY uses to evaluate the quality of the courses. And that's something we could do. We could include some checks on. We're also thinking about things in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion. What kind of tools would you need to know if your course is meeting some threshold of that? And so I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk through, or even get some ideas from you guys about other types of audits or rubrics or tools that you might want to see as part of this review functionality.
This is one of the things that I'm really excited about, because what's sitting behind this is an audit framework, right? So we've got a sort of generalized audit framework, and this leaves open the potential to build new audit tools. And then within those audit tools, you can keep on expanding your checks, right? This isn't a perfect accessibility audit. This is certainly not a perfect pedagogical audit. But having started with these pieces, we now can start to roll through and expand the capabilities. The notion of a DEI audit tool, on the one hand, we can imagine doing some, with current technologies, doing some rapid investigation of inclusivity in language and representation in images. But you can also imagine, partnering up with some of our colleagues in machine learning to start to do some much deeper analysis to better understand some of these questions of representation and equity within a course. So I'm really excited about this. I think it's going to lead us to better courses, and it gives us another hook to do better research.
So thoughts, reactions?
So when you run this audit, does it give you a link to the page? I'm not clear, like where, okay, thank you. Okay, never mind. Okay.
Yeah, and in the missing alt text, it actually gives you the image, and you can go from there.
And hi everyone, this is Cullen. I also just wanted to know, with the accessibility checker, are you looking to also track, let's say, video content that maybe lacks captions, or are you thinking about maybe partnering with a company that might be able to include some of that functionality to kind of track that?
I think yes is the answer to all those questions. I mean, we'd love to learn more about what sorts of things we should be auditing for. And
yeah, I mean, Blackboard Ally is probably one of the best accessibility checkers, within an LMS that I've seen.
Well, your mic is doing funky things. We can't hear you. I'm sorry. we're having trouble hearing you. I'm so, and you're saying a lot. It sounds good. Maybe you can follow up with something, or I can follow up with you individually. Who is this speaking?
I'm not sure he hears you, Erin.
I don't think he does, right? Yeah, thanks, Norm, if you're texting.
Yeah, I'm sending him a text. I've got Kelvin's contact info, so I can also. I will send
sorry
it.
about that.
Oh, we can hear you now.
You just became clearer.
Right.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, I was just saying, you know, Blackboard Ally, and then in terms of pedagogical tools like the QM rubric, you know, similar to a product called CourseTune, it would be great to be able to kind of almost like give a school the ability to select which pedagogical, you know, audit they want to run based on the courses that they're building. But of course, that gets complicated.
I think that's exactly the way we want to go, though. Essentially, not everybody is going to want to see, you know, big long lists of audits. And maybe if you're checking a specific thing, you know, a run through of a review just for accessibility, then you want to pay attention to the accessibility list. In addition, different people might be resolving these issues, right? So we would want the ability to have different views into it, I think. And we do right now, by the way.
Well, and I think the other thing that we'll get out of this beyond sort of immediate better courseware is that this is going to give us the full stack of information to start to understand which of these audit tools leads to improvements in outcomes for students, right? Like it doesn't just become a matter of, well, do we want to use Oscar or do I have a preference for, you know, my institutional approach? It's saying, look, when you review for these components and you address them, we see a change in student behaviors or in student outcomes. And I'm, again, excited at the kinds of work we're going to be able to enable on the research side.
Absolutely. And thanks, Kyle.
I guess as a devil's advocate, I'd be a little worried about overdoing the auditing stuff with respect to, you know, like just like adding a caption on a figure is unlikely to show up in improved learning, for example. And the stuff that's going to be easy to do in the audit, I think is going to tend to be of that character, unlikely to have a clear impact on learning. Still may be very worthwhile to do because, you know, you might have fully intended to have a caption on that figure and to have it noted and be able to fix it quickly is great. But I don't know, like a deeper pedagogical output depends a lot on theories of learning that may not be all that generalizable to, you know, across contexts.
Yeah, and to Ken's point too, you know, it's challenging because even if we add captions, there's no, you know, there's no requirement for students to use them, right? And so that also fudges the data that we would be able to collect.
Yeah, I'd be interested in knowing the type of caption, if the type of caption makes a difference. I have a theory about that. But things like that, just be able to do those experiments, right? You know, the generalizable nature of those might not be solid, but I think every little bit that we can gain in terms of insights from how we design is always going to be helpful. And
yeah, I guess part of my caution though is related to limited resources on the development team. So,
yeah, of course.
You know, where are you going to get the most bang for the buck?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that's also understanding what the minimum is for accessibility requirements versus, you know, the full range of what UDL would suggest that you apply. Trying to understand where that line is and where we put those limited resources is another place that we can investigate.
Yeah, and maybe again, it comes down to just having a conversation, right, with Blackboard, let's say, in terms of just ensuring that, you know, any content that's saved within Torus could be picked up, you know, by their audit checker, you know, so it's maybe again, it's just more of some type of an ongoing conversation, so that, you know, if schools are going to, you know, link back to this, their Blackboard Ally instance can, you know, include it in the course level or the institutional level Ally report that can be generated.
Oh yeah, reporting is another use for this. Right, we're having this view for course development, but being able to report this out in some way would probably be useful too. And then I was also thinking maybe having more control over what you're including or not as part of accessibility, as part of pedagogy, might be nice as well, right? Okay. Thank you all so much for this great feedback. This has been a really helpful and productive meeting. And so I want to go back and just let you know, since we're running out of time, some things for the future. So please visit the Torus community webpage, and let me put this in the chat in case you don't have it. Oops. Just give me a second to move some windows around. Oh, man. So this web page, as I mentioned before, I put the links out to, I'm sorry, I really have a hard time moving these windows around. Okay, there's the link. And on this page, and I guess maybe I could just go to it since I'm on a browser. We have a place to submit ideas for Torus. So this is a web form. So if you have ideas that you've thought of since the meeting or during the meeting that you didn't want to speak up about, oh, the link didn't come through. Sorry, guys. I sent that to one person. There we go. Oh, no problem, Kelvin. Thanks for joining. Really appreciate it. So you can submit an idea for Torus on this page. You can also see the upcoming meeting schedule and register for these meetings. There's also important links either to go to Torus and create an account. The Torus GitHub repository has the code, but also a roadmap if you want to see what's coming and by when. And then, there's a link directly to the roadmap and to a previous demo, full demo of Torus. I also put the links to these meetings here. Next meeting will be on April 2nd, and it says wish list items in the list, and those wish list items are going to be particularly about design tools. It's been a conversation my learning engineers and I have been having for a while, is the best functionality and features we need within Torus to be able to do design of courses. You know, think of when you have a blank slate and the things that you need to do as part of design. I'd love to hear from folks if they have some ideas on that. So thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. It's been a great meeting. We've received lots of great feedback and ideas. We'll put those in notes and keep feeding those to the development team, as well as digging in further with some of you who've been on the call. So Ken, where do the Google form items fit into?
Not the Google form items, just the idea of, like, if I build something with Torus, or I have students in my class build something with Torus or in summer school, and they want to try it out and get some data, you know, can that be done in a week? Or when will we have a version of Torus where that turnaround can be done, you know, in hours, days, or a week?
We have that ability, so we should probably sit down and talk with you and maybe give
yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to see you kind of.
Yeah, I'll reach out and maybe we can schedule an orientation for your students or whoever you think should get to see.
Or the Metals Learning engineer team might be good.
First place to start. Okay.
Maybe they can show me.
I actually have a note to reach out to them already to schedule some meetings more to get more feedback on them and from their experiences, so that we can interpret, we can build Torus to support them, as well as your larger student population doing quick turnaround on projects.
Yeah, for the fall, right.
Yeah.
And summer school before that, right?
You're right.
Hey, Nabora, it's great to see you. We were just talking about Sim Student in my class yesterday. Yesterday.
So nice to see you. Oh.
Yeah, love to hear what's going on. I'm supposed to be finalizing an EDM paper now with Nepal. So I got to run, but yeah, good to see you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Erin.